Introduction. In September 1940, the world felt like it was ending. War was spreading across Europe. Families were hiding in basements. Soldiers were marching through the streets of France. Most people believed that the world was a dark, dangerous place, and that there was nothing left to discover. They thought the old world was gone, and only the scary new world of bombs and sirens remained. In a small town called Montagnac, 4 teenagers and a dog named Robot were walking through the woods. They weren't thinking about the war or the history of the world. They were just being kids. Suddenly, Robot disappeared. He had fallen into a deep hole hidden by some bushes. One of the boys, Marcel, climbed down to save him. He didn't find a trapped dog in a simple hole. He found a doorway. When the boys lit a small lamp, they saw something that shouldn't have existed. The walls were covered in giant, colorful paintings of horses, deer, and bulls. These paintings were bright and beautiful. They looked like they had been painted yesterday, but they were actually 17,000 years old. While a giant war was happening on the surface of the earth, a pristine, perfect world had been waiting in the dark for thousands of years. The teenagers had found the caves of Lascaux. It changed how we look at humans forever. It proved that even in the middle of chaos, there is a part of us that is ancient, creative, and untouched by the outside world. Your mind is a lot like those caves. Right now, your life might feel like a war zone. You might feel stressed at work or lonely at home. You might feel like you are always failing at your relationships, or that you are just too sensitive for this world. But deep underneath the stress and the noise, there is a part of you that was formed a long time ago. It is your inner child. This part of you holds your original joy, your wildest dreams, and your deepest fears. It has been waiting in the dark for you to find it. Most of us go through life trying to be good adults. We pay our bills, we go to meetings, and we try to act like we have everything under control. We think that if we just work harder or stay more organized, we will finally feel happy. We treat our emotions like a math problem that needs to be solved. But logic doesn't work on a broken heart. You can't think your way out of a panic attack. You can't plan your way out of feeling unworthy. This is because the part of you that is hurting isn't your adult self. It is the child inside you who was told they weren't enough, or who felt ignored, or who had to grow up much too fast. When you get a text from a friend and they sound a little bit off, and your heart starts racing, that isn't the adult you reacting. That is the 6-year-old you who is afraid of being left alone. When your boss gives you a tiny piece of advice and you feel like crying or quitting your job, that is the 10-year-old you who was always criticized by a parent. We call this emotional age. You might be 30, 40, or 60 years old on the outside, but inside you might be reacting to the world like a toddler who was never hugged. This book is about going down into those caves of your past. It isn't about getting lost in the darkness. It is about bringing a light with you, so you can finally see what is there. It is about becoming the parent to yourself that you always needed. The weight of the invisible map. Every child is born with a blank map. As you grow up, your parents, your teachers, and your neighborhood draw lines on that map. They tell you where it is safe to go and where it is dangerous. They tell you which parts of yourself are good and which parts are bad. By the time you are an adult, you are following an invisible blueprint. You don't even know you are doing it. You just think, this is just how I am. You might think it's normal to always say yes to people, even when you are tired. You might think it's normal to feel guilty whenever you spend money on yourself. You might think it's normal to date people who don't respect you. It isn't normal. It is just the map you were given. The problem is that many of our maps were drawn by people who were lost themselves. If your parents were always worried, they drew fear all over your map. If they were critical, they drew shame in the center of your heart. You have been trying to navigate a modern world using an old, broken map. No wonder you feel lost. This workbook is your tool for redrawing that map. You are going to look at the lines that were drawn for you and decide which ones to keep and which ones to erase. You are going to learn how to set boundaries, which are like gates on your map that keep the wrong people out and let the right people in. You are going to learn how to build secure relationships, where you feel safe enough to be your real self. This is a promise: you are not broken. You are just programmed with a blueprint that doesn't fit who you really are. By the end of this journey, you will be an integrated adult. This means the child inside you and the adult you see in the mirror will finally be on the same team. You will know how to comfort yourself when you are sad. You will know how to say no without feeling like a bad person. You will finally feel at home in your own skin. Meeting Sarah. To see how this works in real life, we should look at Sarah Jenkins. Sarah is 34 years old. She lives in a beautiful, clean apartment in Seattle. She has a very important job as a senior project manager at a big tech company. If you saw her walking down the street, you would think she had it all figured out. She wears sharp suits, she carries a leather bag, and she is always on time. But Sarah has a secret. She is exhausted. One Tuesday morning, Sarah was standing in her glass-walled office. Her boss, a man named Marcus, walked in. He looked at a report she had spent all weekend working on. He pointed to one small graph and said, "I think we should change the color of this so it stands out more. Also, could you double-check the numbers for June?" It was a small comment. It wasn't even a mean comment. But as soon as Marcus left the room, Sarah's hand started to shake. Her chest felt tight, like someone was squeezing her lungs. She felt a hot wave of shame wash over her face. She sat down at her desk and felt a huge urge to cry. A voice in her head started screaming, "You're a failure. He hates the report. You're going to get fired. You're not good enough for this job. You're just a little girl pretending to be an adult." Sarah is a chronic perfectionist. She works 14 hours a day because she believes that if she is perfect, nobody can hurt her. She dates men who are distant or need fixing because it feels safer than being with someone who actually cares about her. Whenever her mother calls to complain about her life, Sarah spends an hour on the phone listening and apologizing, even though it makes her feel sick. Sarah feels like a victim to her own feelings. She doesn't understand why a tiny bit of feedback makes her want to hide under her desk. She feels too much and not enough at the exact same time. She is stuck in a loop of people-pleasing and burnout. Sarah is the gifted child who learned that her only value was in what she could do for others. She never learned how to just be. She is 34 on the outside, but in that office, she felt like a 7-year-old girl who just got a bad grade on a test. Throughout this book, we are going to follow Sarah as she learns to heal. You will see her face her critical mother, learn to say no at work, and finally stop dating men who don't show up for her. Her story is the story of someone moving from a wounded child to an integrated adult. You will probably see a lot of yourself in her. The path forward. Healing your inner child isn't just about thinking about the past. It is about taking action in the present. This workbook is built on real science and the work of people who dedicated their lives to understanding the human heart. We will learn from John Bowlby, who discovered that the way your parents held you, or didn't hold you, created the attachment style you use in your marriage today. We will look at the work of Alice Miller, who showed that being a perfect child is actually a way of hiding a deep wound. And we will find comfort in the lessons of Fred Rogers, who knew that the most important thing a person can do is learn how to name their feelings. The journey ahead is divided into steps that will help you rebuild your life from the ground up. Mapping the past. You will discover the invisible blueprint that is running your life and identify the roles you were forced to play as a kid. Finding safety. You will learn how to create a safe space inside yourself so you don't have to look for validation from people who don't deserve it. Setting boundaries. You will practice saying no and realize that a boundary isn't a wall to keep people out, it's a gate that keeps you safe. Handling emotions. You will learn vagal tone and box breathing to calm your body when you feel a limbic hijack coming on. Reclaiming joy. You will reopen the abandoned playroom in your mind and remember how to have fun without feeling guilty about being productive. This isn't a book you just read. It is a book you do. There will be exercises, writing prompts, and small challenges. Some of it might feel a little bit scary. You might feel a vulnerability hangover after talking about things you've kept hidden for years. That is okay. That is a sign that you are finally climbing down into the cave. You have spent enough of your life feeling like you are too sensitive or broken. You have spent enough time trying to win the approval of people who will never give it to you. The teenagers in 1940 found a world of beauty in the middle of a war. You can do the same thing. Your inner child is waiting for you. They aren't angry. They are just tired of being alone in the dark. They are waiting for the adult version of you to reach out a hand and say, "I've got you now. We're going to be okay." The light is in your hand. The cave is open. Let's begin. Chapter 1: The Invisible Blueprint, Mapping Your Early Origins. In 1905, Sigmund Freud was the most famous doctor in the world. He sat in his office in Vienna, surrounded by heavy velvet curtains and the thick smell of cigar smoke. He had just published 3 essays that changed everything people thought about the human mind. To the public, he was a hero who had discovered the secrets of the unconscious. He was a man who had finally mapped the dark corners of the human heart. But deep down, Freud was hiding a ghost. He was hiding a truth he had discovered nearly 10 years earlier, a truth he had been too afraid to keep telling. This ghost started in 1896. At the time, Freud was not yet a superstar. He was a struggling doctor, listening to women tell him stories about their childhoods. These women weren't talking about dreams or hidden desires. They were talking about real things that had happened to them. They spoke of being hurt, ignored, or treated poorly by the adults who were supposed to love them. Freud listened, and he reached a bold conclusion. He called it his seduction theory. He told the medical world that the reason these adults were struggling with fear and sadness was that they had been treated badly as children. He argued that the past was a real physical map that dictated how they felt today. The medical world did not want to hear it. The rich families of Vienna were insulted. If Freud was right, it meant that respectable parents were responsible for the pain of their children. The pressure on him was immense. He was laughed at in meetings. His friends stopped talking to him. He faced the very real chance of losing his job and his reputation. Freud broke. He didn't just change his mind, he flipped the script entirely. He retracted his theory and told the world that these patients hadn't actually been hurt. Instead, he suggested they had imagined or fantasized their trauma. He said the pain wasn't caused by what parents did to their children, but by the children's own internal drives. With that one choice, the study of childhood trauma was buried for almost 100 years. The invisible blueprint that shapes our lives was tucked away in a drawer, and the world was told to look everywhere else for the answers to their pain. The map we never asked for. Every one of us is born into a world we didn't choose. We arrive as blank slates in some ways, but we quickly begin to absorb the rules of our environment. Think of your childhood home as a construction site. Your parents, your teachers, and your siblings were the builders. Without you even realizing it, they were laying down the pipes, wiring the electricity, and framing the walls of your personality. This is your invisible blueprint. A blueprint tells a builder where the doors go and which walls are load-bearing. If the blueprint says a room should be dark and small, the builder won't put in a window. Our early lives work the same way. If you were raised in a house where your feelings were ignored, your blueprint might say, "My voice does not matter." If you were only praised when you got straight A's, your blueprint might say, "I am only worthy of love when I am perfect." These rules aren't written in ink on paper. They are written in the neural pathways of your brain. By the time you are 7 years old, most of your default settings are already locked in. You don't walk around thinking about these rules every day, just like you don't think about the pipes under your floorboards. But the moment a pipe leaks or the lights flicker, you feel the effects of that original design. For Sarah Jenkins, the blueprint was hidden under a layer of lemon-scented floor wax. It was a Sunday night in Seattle, and her high-rise apartment was silent. Most people would be relaxing before the work week, but Sarah was on her hands and knees in the kitchen. She was scrubbing a floor that was already spotless. Her heart was racing. She felt a strange, heavy pressure in her chest, the kind of feeling you get when you think you've forgotten something important. She didn't have a deadline. She didn't have guests coming over. But a voice in the back of her head was whispering, "A messy house is a messy mind." It was her mother's voice. It was a rule from a blueprint drawn 30 years ago in a different house, hundreds of miles away. Sarah's mother had been a highly critical woman who used tidiness as a weapon. If the house wasn't perfect, it meant the family was failing. As Sarah scrubbed, she suddenly stopped. She looked at her reflection in the oven door. She realized she wasn't cleaning for herself. She was cleaning for a ghost. She was 34 years old, a senior executive with a corner office and a degree from a top university, yet she was still a little girl trying to avoid her mother's disapproval. She had spent her whole life following a map she didn't even know she was carrying. This was her aha moment, the realization that her current stress wasn't about the kitchen floor. It was about the blueprint. The body as a time capsule. For decades after Freud's retreat, science ignored the link between childhood and adult health. Doctors treated heart disease with medicine and depression with talk therapy, but they rarely asked, "What happened to you when you were small?" That changed in the mid-1990s in a very unlikely place, a weight loss clinic in San Diego. Dr. Vincent Felitti was frustrated. He was helping people lose weight, but many of his most successful patients were suddenly quitting. They would lose 100 pounds and then purposefully gain it all back. It made no sense. Why would someone work so hard to get healthy and then sabotage themselves? When Dr. Felitti began interviewing these patients, he found a shocking pattern. For many of them, the extra weight wasn't just fat, it was a suit of armor. It was a way to feel safe and unseen in a world that had been dangerous to them when they were children. He realized that their bad habits, overeating, smoking, or drinking, were actually solutions to a much deeper problem. They were using these behaviors to cope with the blueprints of their past. This led to the Adverse Childhood Experiences, ACE study. It is one of the most important medical studies ever conducted. Researchers looked at thousands of people and asked them 10 simple questions about their childhoods. Did your parents divorce? Was there someone in the house who struggled with alcohol? Did you feel unloved or unprotected? The results were undeniable. The more hits someone took as a child, the more likely they were to struggle with their health as an adult. It wasn't just all in their head. The stress of a difficult childhood actually changed how their bodies functioned. It affected their immune systems, their hearts, and their brains. The study proved that we don't just get over our childhoods. We carry them in our cells. The ghost in your genes. It turns out that the blueprint might even be older than we are. In the winter of 1944, the Netherlands was under Nazi occupation. The food supply was cut off, and the people began to starve. This period became known as the Dutch Hunger Winter. People were forced to eat tulip bulbs just to survive. Pregnant women gave birth to tiny, underweight babies. Years later, scientists studied those babies as they grew into adults. They found something incredible. Those children, and even their children's children, had higher rates of obesity and health problems. Even though they grew up with plenty of food, their bodies were still programmed for a world of hunger. This is the science of epigenetics. It shows that the experiences of our parents and grandparents can actually leave tags on our DNA. If your grandmother lived through a time of great fear, she might have passed down a nervous system that is tuned to look for danger. You might find yourself feeling anxious for no reason, not realizing that you are reacting to a blueprint that was drawn before you were even born. This sounds heavy, and it is. But there is a reason we look at the map. You cannot change a building if you don't know where the load-bearing walls are. If you try to knock down a wall without checking the blueprint, the whole roof might come down. Understanding your invisible blueprint isn't about blaming your parents or getting lost in the past. It's about becoming the architect of your own life. Identifying your role. In every family construction site, children are often assigned a specific role to keep the building standing. These roles help the family survive stress, but they can become a prison for the child as they grow up. See if you recognize yourself in any of these common blueprint roles. The hero, this is the child who is perfect. They get the best grades, never get in trouble, and make the family look good to the outside world. Inside, they feel an immense pressure to never fail. As adults, they often become workaholics and perfectionists like Sarah. The scapegoat, this child is the problem. They act out, get in trouble, and draw all the negative attention. By being the bad one, they distract the parents from their own problems. As adults, they may feel like they are always broken or not enough. The lost child, this child stays quiet and stays out of the way. They learn that the best way to be safe is to be invisible. They don't ask for anything and they don't make waves. As adults, they may struggle to know what they want or how to speak up for themselves. The mascot, this is the funny one. They use humor and charm to break the tension in the house. If everyone is laughing, they aren't fighting. As adults, they may use jokes to avoid deep emotions or heavy conversations. Sarah was clearly the hero. In her childhood home, she learned that her only value came from her achievements. When her mother criticized her, Sarah didn't fight back. She just worked harder. She cleaned better. She got higher grades. She believed that if she could just be perfect enough, the house would finally feel safe. But the problem with being a hero is that you can never rest. The moment Sarah finished scrubbing that kitchen floor, her brain was already looking for the next mess to fix. She was living in a state of hypervigilance, a fancy word for being constantly on guard. Her blueprint told her that danger was always around the corner, and only perfection could keep it away. Auditing the blueprint. To change your life, you have to start by auditing your blueprint. You have to look at the rules you live by and ask, who wrote this? Most of us live by inherited rules. These are beliefs we took as facts because they were all we knew. A rule might be, never show anger. A rule might be, it's my job to make sure everyone else is happy. A rule might be, asking for help is a sign of weakness. When Sarah realized she was cleaning for her mother's ghost, she was performing an audit. She looked at the rule, a messy house is a messy mind, and she realized it wasn't her rule. It was a rule she had inherited from a woman who was herself struggling with fear. Sarah took a deep breath, put the scrub brush down, and walked out of the kitchen. She left the floor half wet. It felt terrifying. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. This is what we call a vulnerability hangover. When you break an old blueprint rule, your brain sends out a frantic alarm signal. It thinks you are in danger because you are doing something unsafe, according to the old map. But as Sarah sat on her couch and watched a movie, nothing bad happened. The ceiling didn't fall. Her boss didn't call to fire her. The world kept spinning. She was starting to redraw the map. She was learning that she could be imperfect and still be safe. The first step toward home. You might feel a bit like those people in the Dutch hunger winter, carrying a weight you didn't ask for. You might feel like Sarah, scrubbing floors at midnight because a voice from 30 years ago told you to. It is important to know that these patterns were not your fault. They were survival strategies. You built that blueprint to stay safe in the world you were given. But you aren't in that world anymore. You are an adult now. You have the power to pick up the red pen and start making corrections. You can decide which walls stay and which ones need to be torn down to let the light in. Healing isn't about erasing the past. You can't unstarve the people in 1944, and you can't go back and give Sarah's mother a different personality. Healing is about recognizing that the invisible blueprint is just a piece of paper. It is not the house. You are the house. And you are allowed to remodel. Today, your only job is to start noticing the inherited rules. You don't have to change them yet. You just have to see them. When you feel that sudden surge of guilt, or that urge to please someone who isn't even in the room, or that voice that says you aren't good enough, stop. Look at the map. Ask yourself, is this my rule or was it given to me? The journey of the inner child begins with this simple act of looking. We are going back to the construction site, not to complain about the builders, but to see where the pipes are buried. Once we know where they are, we can finally stop the leaks. Your blueprint audit. To begin mapping your own origins, you need to find the rules that are currently running your life. This isn't about big, dramatic memories. It's about the small, quiet shoulds that dictate your day. Take 10 minutes today to do a rule audit. Grab a piece of paper or open a note on your phone. Write down 3 things you did today that felt like obligations or made you feel anxious. For each one, ask yourself, what was the rule? Example, I had to answer that work email at 8 p.m. Where did it come from? Example, my dad always said that hard work is the only thing that matters. Does this rule serve me now? Example, no, it makes me feel exhausted and keeps me from my family. Just by writing these down, you are taking the invisible out of the blueprint. You are becoming the observer of your own life, rather than a prisoner of your past. This is the first most vital step toward reclaiming your power. You are no longer just a builder following old instructions. You are finally becoming the architect. Chapter 2. Why do we repeat our parents' mistakes? In the early morning of a gray Tuesday in 1944, London was a city of sirens and smoke. Most people were looking at the sky, watching for planes. But inside a small clinic, a man named John Bowlby was looking at something else. He was looking at the faces of 44 young boys who had been caught stealing. The world called these boys thieves and criminals. Most doctors at the time thought these children were simply born with a bad streak. They believed some kids were just rotten apples who liked to break the rules. John Bowlby didn't buy it. He sat in his office, surrounded by stacks of folders, drinking tea that had gone cold. He spent hours talking to these boys and, more importantly, talking to their families. He noticed a pattern that everyone else had missed. It wasn't that these boys wanted money or shiny toys. It was that they were missing a piece of their souls. Out of the 44 thieves, a large group of them shared a strange trait. They didn't seem to care about anyone. They didn't feel sorry for what they had done. They didn't even seem to care if they were punished. Bowlby called them affectionless. When he dug deeper into their lives, he found the smoking gun. Almost every single one of those affectionless boys had been separated from their mothers for a long time when they were very small. Some had stayed in hospitals alone. Others had been sent away during the war. They had lost their secure base, that one person who made them feel safe. Because they didn't feel safe, they stopped feeling anything at all. This was the birth of attachment theory. It was a radical idea back then. It suggested that how our parents treat us in the first few years of life creates a permanent map in our heads. This map tells us if the world is a safe place or a scary one. It tells us if people can be trusted or if they will eventually leave us. Bowlby realized that we don't just get over our childhoods. We carry the map with us into every room we walk into as adults. The invisible blueprint at work. Your brain loves what is familiar. This is a survival trick that helped our ancestors stay alive. If a caveman knew that a certain path led to a berry bush, he took that path every day. It didn't matter if there was a shorter path. The old path was safe because he had survived it before. In psychology, we call this repetition compulsion. It is the strange urge to repeat the same painful patterns over and over again. We don't do it because we want to suffer. We do it because our inner map says that this pain is home. If you grew up with a parent who was cold or distant, your brain learned that love feels like chasing someone who won't look at you. As an adult, you might find yourself dating people who are emotionally unavailable. You might work for a boss who never gives you a compliment. On the outside, you complain about it. But on the inside, your inner child is saying, I know this feeling. I know how to survive this. This is where I belong. Breaking this cycle is hard because it means walking off the map. It means trying a new path where you don't know where the berry bushes are. To change the map,